Good morning, Department of Education. There's a lot of you on the line today, so I'll just wait until you all come into the room and then I'll start. But absolutely happy Friday for all of you today, and I hope you have the most wonderful day with free from stress, just a really enjoyable, fun day. Is that possible? Well, hopefully, right? Hopefully it's possible, but we never know, I guess. So welcome. I can see most of you, if not all of you, in the room right now. Nope, you're still coming into the room. That should be about it now. So welcome, Department of Education. Fantastic to have you with me again today. As usual, I'm really looking forward to discussing this particular topic, super stressed, with you, largely because I think it's a topic that I think really is very appropriate for the department. As some of you may know, I spent probably about 8 months last year with some of my team members, upskilling a group of 20 wonderful female leaders in the Department of Education. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is because it gave me a really good helicopter overview, but also somewhat of a deeper dive into what life is like working in your roles and what the challenges are, and also the fact that, you know, it's a very quick environment, it's very fast, there's lots of things that have to be done, there's lots of things that have to be carried out. And I guess the one word I used, which was, and maybe it's a little bit unfair, but I'm not sure, because some of the female leaders actually agreed with me, it feels chaotic at times. You know, so much going on, so much to do, so many things that have to be revisited and then implemented. And I think that, you know, most of the women who I was training with actually agreed with that. But I think, therefore, it loops back to our discussion today, which is around being super stressed. And what is stress, and what is resilience, and how can we become less stressed and more resilient over time? And I think it's a really critical discussion in terms of the world today and how much everything has changed and how much we have to either go with that change, or obviously, if we are avoiding that change, how much more stress it creates for us. So welcome. It's really lovely to have you with me. As most of you will know, my name's Karen Walsh, obviously, and today we're going to be talking about super stress, the age-old story, ladies and gentlemen. There might be some of you on the line who are new. Most of you, I think I've recognized your names before, but either way, what I will ask, as I always do, please speak to me on the Q&A box where we'll have our chats, and I'll send the polls and all those kind of things. Don't use the chat box. The Q&A is where I'm going to be. So at that particular beginning, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Q&A box, and I'm going to ask one or two of you, just tell me two things, the age-old two things. A, can you see the screen? B, can you hear my voice? Those are the two most important things for our session today. Thank you, Louise. I appreciate that. Okay. Thank you, Daisy. Well, there's a lot of you on the line today. Actually, it's really lovely to have you. I'm going to, as I always do, I'm going to remove my actual video of myself in the corner, because as usual, it's distracting for me. Just one little thing. I'm a bit croaky today, but so if you hear a little bit of a silence after I've spoken, generally it means I'm taking a sip of water, but other than that, I'm good to go. So welcome. Okay. Now, hopefully you were able to do your pre-work, which was a reading about resilience. It was also a stress test and a resilience test. And obviously the pre-work is an important preamble to the sessions that I do, because they get you thinking about the topic. They give you activities to really think about how you sit with regards to the things that I'm talking about, such as stress and resilience. And they form part of, I guess, the content around getting you into the thinking of what I'm talking about on the session. So hopefully you've had the time to do that, and hopefully you've actually learned something about that. Maybe you think, oh gosh, I never knew I was so stressed, or gosh, I never knew I wasn't so stressed. But either way, they're just tools for you to get a better understanding maybe of how you are in terms of stress and resilience today. Okay, so what are we going to do today? We're going to talk about stress. And one of the things I'd like to just make at the outset a comment is that there's probably a lot of today that you not necessarily know. You'd probably know most of it. Some of the statistics I'm going to give you, you may not know, and some stuff you may not know. But overall, you would know a little bit about stress and a little bit about resilience. Although I think we know more about stress and the nature of stress and the definition, then maybe we know about resilience. And there's been equal amounts of studies done around both, although certainly the looks and the discussions around stress has been more prolific since COVID started. So those are things we're going to talk about: the definition of stress types, defense mechanisms, coping with stress and COVID. And then we're going to swing into the definition of resilience, the 7 C's, the studies around resilience, human ways of thinking, and how to build your resilience during, well, any time really. So those are the basic things, but obviously there's a bit more in each of those categories that I will be talking to you about. But nevertheless, this is what we're going to be doing today in terms of the overall totality. So I won't stay here too long. My name is Karen Walsh. I'm a psychologist by training. I work on 3 different continents: Africa, Fiji, and Australia. And my role, I'm at the head of a company called Pure Magic International Business Solutions. And we go into organizations across the 3 continents, and we do leadership development, leadership programs, team development programs, executive coaching, all those kind of things. I speak at about 25 conferences a year. And I've been doing that for a long, long time. So my real passion is doing the sort of thing I'm doing today, teaching people how to live in the most, I guess, appropriate way for them and the most healthy way for them, and not to get too stressed and overwhelmed by their roles. Now, you will notice, ladies and gentlemen, that in some of the actual slides I have, and this is one of the examples, that you will see, hold on, I've seen that picture before. Yes, you have. You saw it in the first round, which was Keep Your Cool. And the reason why some of the photographs I'm using as replications of the first series is because I'm creating a link between each of the topics that I'm talking about. So this is one of the linking slides, as we call it, to show that it's in the particular Leading with Impact series. And again, you know, as I said to you in the first webinar or online session, as this new world dawns, what are we learning about ourselves, how we manage our stress, what resilience we have during COVID-19? We know, obviously, that there's unprecedented global stress like the world has never seen, and even more so than world wars in the way, because not every country was involved in the Second World War, for example. Switzerland wasn't, as an example, but obviously every single solitary country and place around the world is involved in COVID. The other thing around things are, you know, in terms of talking about World War II, there were some areas of boom, like armaments, working for the armed forces, whereas in this particular pandemic, it's affecting everybody. It doesn't matter race, color, creed, gender. The fact is that we are entering a new world, and it's never going to go back to what it was. And there's huge uncertainty about so many different things. My future, oh my gosh, will I keep my job, money, you know, the existential crisis of what on earth am I doing with my life? And it doesn't matter where we go, wherever we go, it's just a whole new world. And so what I'm hoping, which is a comment I made in the first series, is have you taken the time out to really think about what you are doing with your life since COVID? Have you really taken any time out to think about the level of stress that you've got? And how are you going to reduce that stress? Or how are you going to deal differently with the stress that comes your way? One of the key things I've learned, and I shared some of this with you last time, but I'm going to share something slightly different, is that what I find is that the lifestyle I have and the pace at which I work, traveling internationally, whilst I'm sure to all of you it sounds so, you know, wonderful and exotic and, you know, Fiji, it's exhausting, it's tiring, and I'm over it. And that was one of the really interesting things that COVID has taught me, is that I don't want to be doing it anymore, because I just walk around tired all the time, you know, from train to plane to cab to hotel. It's just exhausting. So that's a tiny example of what I've thought about how to change my life. So towards the end of this particular session, I'll loop back to this question, because I think it's important to begin and end with it. So what have we seen in terms of unprecedented global stress? What are we looking at? Well, it's a completely changed world. You know, things will just not be the same. And I have no idea how we are going to, you know, move back to a world that sort of exists without face masks. Wherever I go, people are wearing face masks. It's like we're living on a moon with a whole new regime of order, right? Massive changes in how we work. Even for, I mean, the department would be a classic example. where all of you were like sort of hands-on, you were at work, you were in schools, in classrooms even, aiding principals, etc., etc. And suddenly you're not allowed to do that. So everything's gone online. And some might think, well, that's so cool, great, that's wonderful, much easier. Well, it's not that easy. And it has actually brought a lot of stress in your lives. I know that because I've worked with some of you, let alone all of the things that you've got to do. You've got to now put your classes online. You've got to work that that's working. You've got to check that things are going okay. You know, you've got to now work remotely and you're wondering if your team is working well remotely. Is it working well? Are we kicking our goals? Are we achieving targets? It's like, whoa. And the thing about becoming digital is that digital doesn't work, you know, for all of us necessarily. I'm a baby boomer, which means I was not born with technology. I've had to adapt to technology. So we are largely and always have been a face-to-face organization. Why? Because we're good at it. You know, we do games and activities, etc. I always believe that the best way to go is face-to-face. So we've had to become digital. And even me talking to you today, like, for example, if we didn't do digital, we wouldn't be here today having this conversation. So for many people, Gen Y, and there's probably a lot of you on the line who are Gen Y just rock with this because they've been brought up with it. If we haven't been brought up with it, it's a lot more difficult. A lot of the councils are our clients. And I remember at the beginning of the year, asking one of Sydney's largest councils, would you ever think about going online? And this was before COVID, right? Oh no, Karen, no, we really do the face-to-face stuff. And unless it's you know, something that actually has to be critical to work on the internet, no, we do the face-to-face. And that same council, probably 85% of their workforce is now working from home and will continue to do so. But one thing I want you to think about in terms of that is that if 85% of their people are working from home, then what they can do is downsize into a much smaller office space for the council, right? Okay. But if they do that, then the people who are actually lending them or from whom they are renting the office space have got another problem because they've got to find new people to take the space that that council used to take. So the knock-on ongoing effects are huge. And if that happens, then the cleaning companies that went into the particular council's offices now are out of a job in that area. And then they don't buy as much cleaning product. And then the cleaning product manufacturers have their areas affected. So, you know, everything has an knock-on effect for everything. And I think it's a really important point to think about. The home-based workplace and all that brings, well, how many times have my friends or even my clients over the years saying, I wish I could work from home? Yes, it has been a wonderful experience because you don't have to spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours traveling to work and traveling back home from work. So let's say on average, you might save yourself 4 hours in an urban location traveling, or even 3 hours, right? So you sit at home and you've got 3 hours more to be able to be more productive and focused. That's great. However, there's downsides. The downsides are that, you know, in the actual lockdown, we've got children at home. The younger they are, the more they have to be entertained. There was school that had to be done from home, as you would know, homeschooling for some of them. There's been a real large impact in relationships, marriages, home relationships. I think I might have shared with you last time, I can't remember, but I'll share with you now. I was doing a domestic violence PowerPoint presentation for a very large insurance company over the last 2 months. So when I do work that I do, I always like to fall back on research and stats, as you would expect me to. And I'd gone into the Google search bar and I'd gone doing some research around. So I was interested in what the impact of the world becoming home-based and how that had impacted home-based relationships. And the first bit of outcomes I found was that there had been an increase in people in Australia typing the words into the Google search bar, what is domestic violence, that had been a 765% increase. Now, that does not mean that there's a 765% increase in DV at home, but it means that 765 increase percentage-wise of people trying to find out if they were living in a relationship that was domestically toxic. Now, some of them would be domestically violent relationships. All I'm trying to show here is that a home-based workplace is not all that we like it to be. There's a lot of downturns and a lot of complications and a lot of difficulties that come with it. And people have had to adapt, families and marriages. You know, and a lot of people, including myself, so how do I adapt professionally to this new world, given that I'm on a plane going all to these continents every day sort of thing. So how do I adapt professionally now to sit at home or in my office to change what I do? Lots of business bankruptcies. That's one of the greatest sadnesses, I think, is small businesses have gone out of business or will go out of business when the JobKeeper fails to exist. You know, JobKeeper has actually kept a lot of businesses going, but it is going to stop. There's huge uncertainty about the future. Stress with children, family, you know, worrying about what the future will bring. Will I still have a job? Won't I have a job? Will I be retrenched? Will I be put into a new role? All of these things, you know what I'm talking about. Will I cope in this new digital world? What does my future hold? You know, and all of those kind of things. And will I be able to cope in this new crazy world? So here's a question I want you to answer for me on the Q&A box, please. What is the biggest stress you have today? Right now, what is the biggest stress that you find that you have today? So it could be personal or professional. And if it's sort of personal, I won't mention your name. But let's just have a bit of a discussion happening here. What is the biggest stress that you have today? By the way, ladies and gentlemen, just a little thing. If you did not get any of the material, please send me an email. I can see, Jackie, you haven't got it. No problem. I'm just going to ask you to actually email me afterwards because otherwise it's hard for me to go back over the Q&A box. Okay, so one of you says money. Okay, and I'm wondering what that is. Is that professional in terms of not earning enough, or money at home, like things are tight? One of you is saying, remembering everything I need to do. I don't know how that works for you. I walk around every day. How sad is this, right? With a calendar on my computer and a physical diary. And I make lists about things that I have to do. My health, absolutely. My health and my family's health and well-being. And it's really interesting. I mean, was that a concern before COVID? Maybe not, maybe. But obviously now it's got worse because we can catch this thing that could actually take us out. And one of you says not knowing whether I will have my job in a year. You know, that's attached to obviously families and money, work-life balance, giving myself permission to take a break. You know, one of you or many more of you are going through maybe a separation. And a marriage separation is so incredibly stressful. And even if you might be the person who's actually, you know, creating the separation, it's very, very difficult. Hard to work with the leadership in the school. And I find that a really interesting comment because it's everywhere. So, you know, I think a lot of people, and when I make this comment, I really don't mean to be disrespectful, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me, I had to take a sip there. But a lot of the time when I'm working with leaders, I'm thinking to myself, how on earth did you get to this principal role, or this, not principal school, but principal role in a company? You know, I think a lot of leaders have got there with being technically competent, but relationally not so good, ex-partners, children, isolation from working at home. I think that's a very important thing that sometimes we overlook. Staying healthy so that my parents are not impacted. Oh, and I'm just reading these things, meeting a deadline, switched on too much of the time, managing a busy workload, a really, really unwell mum who's got a very, you know, life-threatening situation, not enough exercise, you know, and I read what you've written and I go, whew. Because what I'm seeing all of you going through is what everybody's going through. Workload, job security, not seeing my kids who live in Queensland, well-being for my family, isolation. And one of you says, lol. Yes, lol. Bottom line is when I'm reading this, we've all got our little crosses to bear that we have to carry. So the question then is, right, COVID-19 has obviously brought with it greater stress, clearly. So if we manage our stress well, does that equal resilience? And the key questions, and this kind of loops back to what I said last time, although the questions around stress are different to last time. What will I be doing differently now and in the future? How will my life be different? How can I be an outstanding person to guide the future? What can I do better to lead more effectively? How can I improve my ability to be a great team member? And what life lessons will this experience teach me? One of the things I noticed yesterday was, and it's crazy, and I'm sure that this will resonate with you, by 3 o'clock, I felt, oh my gosh, I feel exhausted. I'm tired. It was a hot day yesterday, but I just felt, oh my gosh, it's all too much. And I went and sat outside. I'm working from home under the tree, and it was just beautiful, but fatigue, you know, and that buys back to what I said earlier. For me, I do too much and it's tiring. And I guess the thing to you is, do you do too much? Is it tiring for you? Is there some way that you can do things differently? Is there some way that you can reshape what you do every day to have yourself a couple of moments where you can spend on you and just gathering your breath and just taking some time out to just breathe? And I think that the things I've just said to you in the comments I've just made now, I would never have said to you a year ago. But I think maybe it's reflective of what I'm feeling, and maybe I'm projecting it onto you based on the comments you put in the Q&A box. So these are really, you know, pretty important questions we need to be thinking about. So managing our stress well. So we talk about it, and I won't stay here. Look at the stress. And this is besides COVID necessarily, right? Loved ones' health, we talked about that. Money, stress around personal relationships. We've got such an increase in mental health issues in Australia that it's spiked out of control. Last night I was lying in bed and I got an email from a mental health provider whom I have never met, but obviously know me via the traps of DV and mental health. And she actually sent me this email yesterday and said she was prepared to pay, or her organization was prepared to pay, for me to go and work and live regionally. They would pay my rent, get this, they would pay my rent, they would pay me a bucket load of money, and they would pay my accommodation, and they'd pay towards my moving costs if I would just go and help peoples with mental health areas, you know, issues in regional areas. Now that would never have happened a year ago, which just says that the issue in mental health is a real problem. Bushfires, environmental stressors, you know, tsunamis, hurricanes. Now we don't have that, but Fiji being one of my, you know, I always call them my second family, as I might have mentioned to you before in another webinar, but they are a tiny nation battered by the elements. You know, they had 2-3 weeks ago, they had a 5.8 on the Richter scale earthquake. Then they have cyclones, then they have hurricanes, then they have COVID. This tiny little island bashed around, and yet they're the most resilient people ever. You know, now this isn't for you, you're not a service, you're a provider, but you know, when we talk about service, I'm talking about disability, aged care, they've got their own issues. Injury, stress, chronic fatigue, staffing issues is sometimes a problem, as you would know more than I do. Difficult family members, I always snuck in their mother-in-laws, but maybe that's a bit cheeky. Existential stress, what am I doing, you know? How old am I now, and how much time do I have left, and am I living it to the best of my ability? Am I enjoying this time called life? Or are there other things I could be doing with this time called life? So there's a lot going on for all of us. And ultimately, if we don't now take a step back and really start thinking about what we are doing about looking after ourselves, it's going to cost us, ladies and gentlemen. Now, more than ever before, because this is the first and unprecedented world pandemic. If we don't take that backward step and think better about how we're going to do this, it's going to cost us. So let's swing into the definition of stress, because it's really interesting. People say, oh, I feel so stressed today, and you know, that person stresses me out, my job load stresses me to the hilt. And often when I say to people, so what does stress actually mean to you? they kind of give me a generalized description without necessarily really realizing what stress truly is. So let's address this issue once and for all. What is stress? Stress is a state of mental, physical, or emotional strain or tension resulting from what we see as adverse or demanding circumstances. And I'm looping back to what I said when I worked with the department last year, the 20 female leaders. It was very evident to me that there's a lot of demanding, conflicting issues coming your way all the time. So by nature of the industry in which you operate, you are operating in a fast-paced, busy, at times chaotic environment. Therefore, it's even more important that as people working within this Department of Education, that you actually start to think about and nail your stress more so than ever before. Why? Because it's not going to get less. If anything, it will increase as an environment into which we operate. Another chaotic, stressful environment, for example, is the healthcare system. You know, all of these cases that we just don't have enough people on the front line. What is it? Tension producing, stressful, chaotic. And unless we start to actually take it upon ourselves to deal with these things differently, nothing will change, but they will get worse. So simply, stress is the outcome of three different things, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. It is the outcome of a relationship between your personality, the way that you perceive pressure, in other words, the way that your thinking is around things, and the amount of and repertoire of coping skills that you use. In other words, if you've got a personality that could be quite chilled, and you're able to have a mindset of, okay, I'm just going to remain calm, and no matter what comes my way, I'm going to be calm and just do one thing at a time, i.e. perceive pressure, and you use a range of coping mechanisms and skills to help you get through every day, like exercise, diet, etc. You either nail stress as best you can, which means that you can grow in it, or if you're a stressy kind of person and everything feels overwhelming and you feel out of control and you're too tired to do exercise or anything that you really enjoy, you're going to see it as a resultant overload. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each of these three things, and this is probably part of today that you may not have considered or may not have been taught around stress. That stress isn't necessarily something that just happens to you and you react to it. I believe, and here's a diamond. You know my diamonds, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who haven't been on the line before, diamond is something I'm thinking about whilst I'm teaching you. So I'm going to give you this diamond. In most cases, stress is a perception and therefore a choice. I'll reiterate. In most cases, stress is a perception and therefore a choice. Now, I know some of you are going to say, what are you talking about, Karen? I'm going to come back to it a little bit later on, because I believe that very often stress is a choice, and I'll explain why I say that a few slides later. Okay, so let's do one at a time. So remember, stress is three things: personality, how we deal with pressure, and how we use a range of coping mechanisms to help us every single solitary day. So personality. Some of you may, or you may not have, I don't know, done the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. The MBTI, as it is called, you can do free online, and it'll give you your type. So I am an ENFJ. So what this means is that the Myers-Briggs type indicator looks at you as a person on 4 different scales. Now, I haven't got this in your workbooks. If you want me to just quickly give you a bit more info, let's go. Grab a piece of paper or somewhere in your workbook. What I want you to do is I want you to draw a line down the middle of the page vertically. So you've got a line down the middle of the page vertically, and then I want you to draw a line horizontally in the middle of the vertical line. In other words, you've got 4 squares that are the same size. Right? Now, above the horizontal line, I want you to draw another horizontal line. And then below the initial horizontal line, I want you to draw another horizontal line. Make sure, I think I've left one up, make sure that you've got 4 horizontal lines and 1 vertical line. Okay, now, where the horizontal and the vertical line meet on all 4 of the horizontal lines, draw a naught. So, naught where the horizontal line meets the vertical line on the first, second, third, and fourth. Okay, so you'll have 4 noughts running down the center of your page where the horizontal and the vertical lines meet. Okay, so the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator looks at 4 scales of our personalities. The first scale is where we get our energy from. So what I want you to do, in the first 2 blocks at the top, so you've got a horizontal line. At the top, the very top of the very first horizontal line, I want you to put extroverted. And the top of the right-hand box at the top, put introverted. And then across the 2, at the very, very top, that scale is called where you get your energy from. So on your left-hand side are your extroverts, and on your right-hand side are your introverts. And that's what we call a scale. Now, there's no research necessarily to say that extroverts are more stressed than introverts or vice versa. So we're not looking at that scale. Let's go to the second horizontal line. And on the left-hand side, to the left of the vertical line, so the second sort of block under extrovert, I want you to put the word sensate, S-E-N-S-A-T-E. Sensate are people who love details. They want to dot their I's and cross their T's. They're very focused on information in front of them. The block to the right of that are the intuitives, the big picture stuff, the visionaries, the Richard Bransons, the Dick Smiths. And that scale, the second scale, is how we make sense of our world. I'm probably confusing you here, but stay with me. The third scale, on the left-hand side, you've got T for thinking. And on the right-hand side, you've got F for feeling. And the scale overall in the center is called how we make decisions. And the very last grouping, if you like, scale, on the left-hand side, you're going to put the word judging, J-U-D-G-I-N-G. And on the right-hand side, you're going to put the word perceiving. Now, this is the scale I want to talk to you about. And what the scale is, which I want you to put across the J and the P, is this: how we structure our world. Okay. Now, basically what the Myers-Briggs looks at is, which are you? Are you more J in your life, or are you more P? Now, you have to be both. You've got to have a bit of J and a bit of P, but it's looking at your dominant behavior, ladies and gentlemen. So at J, I want you to write some of these descriptions down. On the left-hand side, your J is somebody who is organized, structured, plan, make lists. In fact, the obsessive compulsive make lists about lists about lists, and they like to tick things off. Tick, 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 tick. J people like to have their world structured and organized so that they feel in control of it. And that's part of the importance of this scale for you now here today. Okay. So J's are people who like to be planned. They like to be organized. They'll never lose their keys. They will never get to the airport realizing that their passport's at home. They'll never be late. They generally pay their fines or whatever it is, their policies on time. They're very organized. Often they'll make lists, right? Monday night dinner, Tuesday night dinner, and they've got all the groceries. On the right-hand side in the perceiving block is you've got perceivers of people who that just go with the flow. Easy going. Cum si, cum sa. She'll be right, mate. No worries. Now, why that's important to this particular personality thing that I'm teaching you in front of you is this. The J's, and I want you to assess which are you more like. Yes, you can be a bit of J and a bit of P, but what are you more like? So I would be a J. I have to have lists. I've got to make sure that my calendar and my diary are synced. And every morning, or actually every Sunday night, I'll see what have I got for this week. And every morning I check my diary, I check my computer, right, I've got to do this. And I tick off things in my diary, done, 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 right? I like to be organized. And when I really think about it, essentially with my psychologist's cap on, I think I do that because it is less overwhelming for me because I feel more in control of what's happening around me. And I think that's an important point. J's are people who need to feel as if they've got control over what goes on around them. The P's, for example, they're much more easygoing. They don't let things bug them. They don't let things annoy them. They just kind of tend to go with the flow. And sometimes, I won't talk about this very much, but a J and a P get married because, oh, she's so organized and she's so lovely and, you know, gets things sorted. And he's so easygoing and he's so wonderful. And 10 years later, they drive each other crazy because she sounds like a control freak and he can't get anything done according to her, right? So when we talk about stress at work, let me finalize it in this way. You might have two babies, they're both 3 months old, lying in the maternity ward, and they've both been burped and fed and cleaned, and they're both good. The P baby will be lying there gurgling and playing with his little toes and smiling. The J baby might still be a bit angsty, right? Now, genetically, we are wired differently. So I tend to be more structured and actually more anxious. Whereas I have a sister who's 17 months older than me she would be off the chart P, nothing bothers her. Which means then that I, as a more wired up person, have to work harder at managing my stress. And I think this is an important point. If you feel that you tend to be more angsty as a person, and you have always been that way, or more uptightish as a person, and have always been that way, you've got to work harder at your stress, much harder. Because the P's don't feel it as much as the J's. So we're good with that. Then we're going to move then into, so pressure. So pressure is a very interesting thing. It builds up and up and up over time. Pressure very seldom, you know, you feel pressure and you blow and you explode. It doesn't work that way. What often happens with pressure is that we take on more and more and more. We may not talk about it because we're too busy. We don't want to bother people, so we just carry it and carry it and carry it, right? And the more things boil up and the less you talk about them and deal with them, often they build and build and build, and then, whoa, the pressure cooker just explodes. So if we don't have a range of coping mechanisms to deal with this thing, eventually it leads to stress. And I'll tell you something, it can kill us. So I had a really fabulous hairdresser a couple of years ago, and she had a husband. They're both Asian, lovely people. He was 39 years of age, really underweight, nice man, not a drinker, big smoker, admittedly. Apparently, she said he was having a couple of issues at work, but she never spoke about it because he was quite an introverted man and he didn't want to burden her with the problems. And he was dead before he hit the floor. At 39, he was dead. And when she and I talked about it a long time afterwards, she said, what do you think? Obviously, it was a heart attack, no doubt about that. But it was stress related. Because things had been going on, he didn't use a range of coping mechanisms. He didn't do anything to get him out of the situation. Now, obviously, certainly the heart attack could have happened anyway. You know, could he have saved his life? I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor. But overall, what I'm saying is if we really start tuning into how we look after ourselves and we look after ourselves socially, emotionally, cognitively, and physically, and spiritually, we can actually live really good lives. But we have to start to acknowledge and to understand what's going on inside of us. So if you get regular backaches, why? Regular headaches, why? Chronic fatigue, why? Migraines, why? So we need to start thinking about this stuff more so we don't fit into the realm of people who die of a heart attack before they get onto the floor. Now, in the coping mechanisms, you know all of these. There's nothing here I can tell you that you do not know, but I can ask you this question, and only you can answer. How many of them do you use? Remember, the theory is the wider the range of coping mechanisms you use, the more you tend to reduce and manage your stress, okay? Exercise. The fact is that I was absolutely gobsmacked a couple of months ago. I was working and doing some research around stress and exercise and the health of Australians. And some of the research I found said that per capita, Australians are the most overweight nation in the world. And I thought, oh, that's absolute nonsense, rubbish. The Americans would beat us at it. You know, the Americans have pancakes and waffles and ice cream for breakfast. And I thought, that's nonsense. So I thought, okay, I'll go into the research another way, which I did. Came out the same thing. Per capita, we are the most overweight nation in the world. And I was staggered with that. But I'll tell you what I do know is that we overall are not an exercising nation. And one of the key things about exercise, and it sounds so boring, but I'm going to say this, is that we know that exercise staves off being overweight. Our blood likes it, our cholesterol likes it, our heart likes it, certainly our mood is enhanced, you know, by the release of endorphins, all those kind of things. We tend to be more positive in mood. We tend to be more happier and more positive in everything we do. And yet we don't do that. I don't get that. So regular exercise should be 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes of time. Why don't we do it? And when people say, I don't have the time, I say that's nonsense. That's an excuse you're making because you're not putting yourself first. You're putting yourself last. And when we talk about really looking after ourselves, I want you to be as selfish as hell. What does that mean? I am absolutely selfish with my self-care. If I want to go away on my own, I will. If I want to go to a movie on my own, I will. I go for regular massage. I exercise 5 times a week. It's what I do. And sometimes my kids say, you're always looking after you. Why don't you look after us? And I say, well, I gave 20 years of my life doing that. Now I'm looking after me. We need to think about our diet because we don't always have good diets, right? High in fat, potentially, too much alcohol, too much smoking, not enough vegetables, too many fatty foods, lots of macas. Now, macas is good, guys, no problem with that, but, you know, a minimalistic kind of approach, right? The biggest problem we have of drinkers in Australia right now, women, get this, 35 to 48, a bottle a day. Why? They're trying to keep stress at bay. So they're using a negative reinforcement to manage their stress. So negative, what's that? Too much alcohol, too much smoking, cocaine, marijuana, whatever, all negative. Positive would be healthy eating, you know, exercise, meditation, mind control, all of those kind of things. 8 hours sleep a night. I remember years ago, I was telling the group from the department on Wednesday, I was running a program in Tamworth years ago. Now, my face-to-face training is pretty interactive. We play games and I really get people going. And there was a woman who came into the program in this Tamworth session, and by 10:15, 10:15, she was asleep on the desk snoring. And I'm not boring, I don't believe, as an educator, but anyway, so we took a break and I took her aside and I said, what's going on for you? She had driven 6 hours that morning to get to the training because regionally they don't really have great training, etc. And so because she got up at 1 o'clock to get there at 8 o'clock or whatever it was, she was asleep. And I said to her, but why did you do that? Why didn't you come up last night? Oh no, I had too much work to do. So the point is that she put herself at risk by not acknowledging what she needed to do to look after herself. And at the end of the day, she's compromising her safety. And when we talk about balance, we've got to look at how we are balanced. Now, here's something I want you to do. I want you to draw a pizza. Quickly draw a pizza, a round circle for me, please. And you're going to divide this pizza into 4 equal slices. So a line down the middle vertically and a line across horizontally. And we've got 4 pieces of pizza. On the bottom left-hand slice of the pizza, I want you to write the word cognitive, mental, please. So how do you look after your brain cognitively? You make good decisions. You might reading. You might be learning a language. You might be playing Scrabble. You're basically looking after your ability to think things through well. When you're stressed and overwhelmed, you don't think clearly. You make bad decisions and you forget things, like you put the iron in the fridge. Okay, the next slice of the pie on the right-hand side, I want you to put, so right-hand bottom slice, I want you to put the heading physical, please. And in the physical slice, you're putting things like exactly what's on the screen. Exercise, sleep, 8 glasses of water a day, vegetables. By the way, we need to cut down on our meat consumption. We should be eating meat maybe twice a week, lean cut, particularly the older we get. And also it should be no bigger than the palm of your hand, the slice. Okay. Now, if you're saying, well, I'm not really doing that, I'm not actually looking after myself physically, you may not then be living in a balanced way. Okay, the top right-hand slice, I want you to put the word social emotional, please. And that means connections with friends, families, spouse, children. And we all need to connect because we're social animals. So do you do that regularly? Do you do that enough? Don't you? Etc. And the last slice on the top left is spiritual. And that's all about how you get time to just kind of recalibrate your life daily. So meditation, music, going for a walk around the park where there's lots of beautiful flowers, you know, that sort of stuff. All right, now, that pie, that slice or pie that you've just done, comes straight out of the work of a person called Stephen Covey. C-O-V-E-Y is his surname. And he wrote the best book he's ever written, or the most that he's most known for, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey, C-O-V-E-Y, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey spent 45 years researching why are some people effective and why are others not. And in his study, he came up with exactly what you've just drawn, that the healthiest and the most balanced and therefore the most effective people on this planet are those who live a daily life in each of those 4 slices and spend at least 1 hour in each slice of that pie every day. Every day they make sure their brain is working. Every day they make sure they're looking after their physical health. Every day they make sure that they're connecting socially. Every day they make sure that they've got some time for themselves. My question to you is, do you? Painting, books, massage, purpose and passion. You all have a purpose. You get out of bed with a purpose to help the children or help the teachers and the principals of the education system that you're trying to keep going. You've got great purpose. And you obviously, I suppose, have been drawn into your career because you're passionate about that. It's wonderful. You know, the greatest things in life are achieved through purpose and passion. An optimistic mindset. So I'm slowly starting to bring in now optimism, which is a very, very key part of managing stress well. So optimism means seeing things positively, you know, seeing things in a positive light as opposed to a negative light. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on. Stop being so hard on yourself. Even some of you, when I asked you the question, you know, what's the greatest stress you have now? Some of you are saying, obviously, money. Some of you are saying, I just feel inadequate. I don't think I'm doing a good job. And I say to some of you, or all of you who said that to yourselves every day and who actually wrote it on the Q&A box, stop it. I don't want you to do that because you've got into a negative way of thinking about yourself, which is not helping you. It's more around thinking about, you know, you are a good person. You're a great resource. You do a good job most of the time, as we all do. Stop being so hard on yourself. And I'll come back to it a little bit later on. Types of stress. There's 3 types of stress, ladies and gentlemen. You're acute. Oh, a pain in the, you know, a pain in your neck, sore back, traffic jam, screaming at your spouse, frustration, being late for an appointment, all those kind of things. They don't last long, but they're painful when they are lasting. Chronic, longer term, recurring, over time. You wake up tired, you go to bed tired. Loss of job, divorce, separation, death of a loved one. You know, this is where domestic violence comes in because often women and men living in relationships that are so toxic that they've been living in those relationships for so long that they don't even realize they're living in them anymore. That's chronic stress, and chronic stress will kill you. In fact, any of these two stresses can kill you. But if you're somebody who's going into a situation longer term in duration, it's slowly but surely winding you down and down. And that's exactly what you don't want. And then when we talk about the good stress, which is eustress, that's the stuff that's the good stress, adrenaline, gets you up and going. You might have to present to, the principal of the school next week, and you've got this huge presentation, and he's got the board there and whatever, and you're a bit nervous. That's good stress. But good stress is what we need to just manage and work more on, as opposed to the acute and the chronic stress. And I suspect that you tend to, and I might be wrong, but I suspect that there's a lot of kind of chronic stress that's going on for some of you in the roles that you're in and the worries that you have. But we'll come back to that a little bit later on. And again, to fight or flight or flow. So obviously we know that fight or flight is the, the animalistic response to danger, essentially. It is bold survival mechanisms enabling people and mammals to react to life-threatening situations, such as COVID. And unfortunately, our body can also overreact to stressors that are not life-threatening, because we've got so much into the groove of being stressed and being overwhelmed that we just get stressed about anything. My son annoys me, so I get stressed, or, somebody looks at me strangely and I get irritated. It's because we're in the constant state, I guess, of fight or flow. It was really interesting. There was a little mouse in my house about a year ago, and I've got a cat. And she was sort of agitated and looking under the lounge sofa. And obviously I knew something was under there. So I picked it up, and this little mouse came running out, and the cat darted after it, and it went into a little, it went under a curtain in a corner. And slowly but surely I walked into the room, and I lifted up the curtain. And this poor little thing, God bless it, it was sort of struggling to get out of the corner, through the wall, which it wouldn't be able to do, obviously. So it turned around and faced the cat, and it stood on its little, bottom feet, and sort of stood on those with its little top feet, looking at the cat, almost to fight it. And it was a classic example of the fight or flight. And I think we do that, but where we need to start thinking about is moving from the fight and the flight to the flow. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. To learn to take things more calmly. Some things we've got to let flow over us. To breathe. To press that pause button. It doesn't mean that you won't feel worried about some things, really. But there's some things that are bigger ticket items that we can't control. And if we can't control them, then we have to come to, if we best can, a situation where we don't let it completely overwhelm us, being J's or P's. So I might have shared with some of you a month ago, my mother broke her neck. Can you believe it? Broke her neck. And she was there, she tripped over a pavement, she's 84, and she broke C1 and C2 in her spinal column, went into hospital. They gave her traction, and then she was going in for an operation to fuse her spine, and her heart stopped. So she was dead for 3 minutes. It was so bizarre, so bizarre. Anyway, if she hadn't been in a hospital, she wouldn't have made it. But they brought her back, and anyway, everything sort of settled down. But I remember thinking how detached I felt that day. And after that, I've never really sort of thought further about it. But it was obviously surreal. But there was nothing I could do about it. Maybe I've taught myself so well over so long, such a lengthy period of time, that I just stayed calm. I was shocked at my own calm, really. It was just, there was nothing I can do about it. Of course I'm upset, of course I'm worried, but it's in the hands of the surgeons and the gods. And I don't know whether that was the appropriate way to feel about it, but I realized that there was nothing I could do about it. So all I did was just try and remain as calm as I possibly could, because I think that's an important thing. And Covey talks about this. He talks about, the only thing over which we have control is us. The influence of control is me. And the only other areas that we can influence is those around us. But for the bigger ticket item, COVID and what's going on in the States and what's happening in Korea, there's no point in worrying about it, because we have no control over it. We can only control over what we have control over. So I think stress is a choice, ladies and gentlemen. Adversity is going to happen in our lives, unfortunately, whether we like it or not. At times, as I've just explained, there's nothing we can do about it. So stressing and worrying is going to make me sick and you sick and people around us sick. I'm not talking about big ticket items here. You know, somebody's dying of cancer or has got MS or all those horrible, horrible issues. I mean, those are very big issues to try and deal with and carry. But I'm talking about really the general daily living. And I really believe that, you know, if your boss gives you another project to do, and if you kind of get all stressy and more J and, oh, I'm getting really overwhelmed, well, what's the point of that? It's more about, okay, you say to your boss, right, so if you're going to give me another thing to do, what would you like me not to do? Because I can't do this and everything else. So help me prioritize for you. Or you just make a list and you just do one thing at a time. And like me or Jay's, you just tick it off and tick it off and tick it off to try and give you the greatest sense of feeling of as if you've got control over it. But if there's nothing you can do, remain calm, think calm, take time out. Do everything you can to rectify the situation if you can. Try and remain positive. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Use as many of the coping skills as you can. Now, this is a key point. And here's a diamond. Your health is everything. Without your health, you have nothing. Your health is everything. Without your health, you have nothing. So if your health is everything, and without it you have nothing, then you better start looking after it, and well. Because here's the thing, nobody else is going to look after it for you. I promise you that. So if you go back to that pizza pie thing slice, and you look over those 4 areas that Covey talks about, make sure that you're living a balanced one. Make sure that there's time for you in your life and you're not just doing everything for everybody else. Because if you are compromising your health. And if you're compromising your health on a daily basis, I say good luck with that, because it's going to cost you. So let's do a little poll right now. How would you rate your level of stress right now in your life overall? So you can only have one answer, so it's single choice only. But let's just have a snapshot of how you are right now as a team on the line. How would you rate your level of stress in your life overall right now? I cannot see your names, ladies and gentlemen, in this survey. I can just see the percentages of people who have actually responded. And the numbers I can see, there's probably 20 of you still to answer. Okay, well, it's really interesting that most of you are saying right now, well, it depends on the day. Some days good, some days bad. If it depends on the day, then it means we can learn to teach ourselves to manage our stress better. 29% are saying mostly chilled, but can get wired up. Very interesting results. Okay, so what I'm going to do is share the results with you, and let's just have a look at this. So you can see what the results are for you. Here we go. So 10% of you are super stressed, And I'm saying to you, if you're super stressed, watch your health. Watch your health. And if you did the stress test earlier, whenever in the week maybe, and your results are high, you are at risk. More stressed than not, 21% you're at risk. Depends on the day says to me that if it depends on the day, you can actually change that, ladies and gentlemen. You can learn to manage your stress better so that you fall on the more chilled and less stressed part of this particular issue. 29, almost a third of you are mostly chilled. That's awesome. So it means that you're actually able to just kind of cruise, can get wired up at times, and 2% of you are just chilling. So overall, you've got a slightly more relaxed group on the line today. The Wednesday one was, I think they were on the super stressed. They were about 14%. So overall, you're slightly less stressed, but still the stress levels are too high. 10% of you are super stressed. So in other words, let's say 30%. So a third of you are sitting in the stress box. A third of you are sitting in the chilled sort of, and a third, or just over a third, are sitting in the depends on the day. I want you to come down to depends on the day so you can start learning to use some of the things we're talking about today to go down to the more chillin'. I'd love to see 70%, 80%, 90% on the chillin'. Interesting outcomes, I guess. Okay, so well done. I'm going to move on now because I'm just conscious of time and I haven't yet hit resilience. But that's okay. I'm not going to stress about that. So what I'm actually showing you is that stress is directly related to the way in which we feel pressure. So the more we feel stressed, the greater the pressure. And obviously the greater the pressure, often the more we feel stressed. But if we're able to deal with our stress and keep it under control, we're better at managing things that come our way. Resilience is our ability to recover from all of those things that kind of are thrown at us. So if you're thrown 15 more projects and you have to have, 5 more meetings every week, your ability to try and think about how you're going to do it and be calmer in doing it then moves you into the aspect of either resilience or super stressed. So what we're going to talk about then is the fact that right now we know it's tough out there, but the importance of resilience in our modern day lives. And what is this thing called resilience? And I thought to myself when I was designing this online session, what's the most resilient animal in the world? Well, it has to be these guys. I mean, they're just built for survival. They can go for months and months and months in 54-degree heat on these, desert sand and stones, no water, no food for 6 months. You think, what on earth are they? They're like dinosaurs, right? But they survive, obviously, because most of the fat's in their humps. We know that. They don't sweat until their body gets to over 41 degrees, and they drink the most amazing amount, 113 liters of water in 13 minutes. The reason why I've got them here, do you have their ability to adapt to changing circumstances? Or are you somebody who holds on to what we had? So there's 3 types of people in change, which is not in your manuals. I'm just going to give it to you now. 3 types of people in change. Number 1, I call the change avoidant. The change avoidant. They will go into the future kicking and screaming not to change. The second type is the change sitters on the fence. Day 1, yeah, you'll change. Day 2, no, they don't like change. Or moment 1, they're okay with change. Moment 2, they don't like change. They're difficult because they're unpredictable. And then your third one is the change lovers. Those are people who love change. They'll go and find change. They'll do things because they're bored with, the age old. So they'll try and do things that actually keep their curiosity and their interest peaked, and they really love it. And what we're trying to do now, moving into this new world, is because we've changed so significantly, we need to become change lovers, not any of the others. And the thing is, do you have that ability to change? And do you think that some of the stress that you have at the moment is because you're one of the change sitters on the fence or the change avoiders? Could it be the fact that you don't like change as much? And do you need to change the way that you think about change to be more engaging and loving of it? Now, I don't have the answer to that, only you do, but just think about it. So what is this thing called resilience? What we know is that resilience is the ability to pick yourself up, persevere in whatever is thrown at you, and on some level recover. For me, generally people, or the definition is that resilience is the ability to bounce backwards. I think it's actually the ability to bounce forward. So that's my own definition. No matter what happens, you just keep going forward. No matter what's thrown at you, you just keep moving forward. But you've got that innate sense of hope and optimism. And I'm going to talk about that now. This particular man over here, between a rock and a hard place, Aron Ralston is his name. He was the guy, if you remember, about 10 years ago. He made some chronic mistakes, silly mistakes, which he knew better about. So he was an adventurist, right? He used to like to go into canyons and deserts and go into adventuring. And, you know, he loved that sort of thing. And one or two of the rules of that is, A, you never go alone, and B, you always tell people where you are. And so he went into the Black Rock Canyon in Utah. And he went into this canyon without telling anybody where he was going or somebody going with him. He broke two of the cardinal rules, and it almost cost him his life. So what happened was, they made a movie of this. He went into this canyon and desert area, and he got his right hand caught under a boulder. And he knew that no matter what he did, he tried to move it, he tried to push the boulder, he couldn't get his right hand removed from this huge boulder. And he knew he was going to die. Why? Because he had broken the two cardinal rules of adventuring. What an idiot, right? So then what he did was, he realized he had a pocket knife in his pocket of his pants. So he took this pocket knife off and he actually cut part of his t-shirt, and he made a tourniquet just above the elbow of his right arm, and he sawed his arm off with the pocket knife. Now that is resilience. He knew unless he did something to change the situation, he was going to die because of two silly mistakes he had made. So he saved his life. Now that's resilience. And now he's a motivational speaker and probably making more money than he ever would have made in the job that he had. So resilience is about our ability to pick ourselves up and to be able to move forward. But the most important thing I think that comes out of this particular picture is the sense of hope and optimism. And I cannot stress enough how important it is in resilience. He had the choice at that moment to roll over and die. Oh my God, I'll never get out of here. I'm going to die. I might as well just roll over and, wait for the end to come. Negative thinking. But he thought, right, what am I going to do to say this? What can I do? That optimistic mindset to try and change what the outcome potentially could be. Now, I'm not sure I could have sawed my arm off, right? But he did, and he survived. So the point around any adversity that comes your way is to try and reframe it when you can to something that's positive. And it's little things like, I was talking to the group on Wednesday about this. Excuse me. It's called a positive explanatory style. So when we've got things in life that come our way, we've got two ways of dealing with life. One is a positive explanatory style, i.e. we look at that adversity and we try and see the positive way to move through it, or the negative explanatory style, i.e. focusing on the negatives and therefore often getting stuck in that thing. What's an example? A couple of months ago, I was driving my car and it doesn't have a navigation, one of those things that you can see what's on the back of you. So I come out of this car park in the shopping village and I went straight into the front of another car. Seriously, really. Anyway, I thought, oh, heck. So I got out of the car and I profusely apologized. I said, I'm so sorry. And he was lovely. His car was not damaged at all. Mine had a huge, sort of dent in it. He said, don't worry, it's fine. It's okay. Now, a negative explanatory style, I could have thought, oh, bloody hell, look at this driver. What an idiot. I could have got out of the car and said, what's your problem? Don't you see what I'm doing? You could have actually, stopped this thing. And I could have exchanged numbers and I could have got back in the car and thought, what an idiot, typical male. No, good at driving. Why don't people be careful on the road? And what's wrong with current day drivers? And I hate driving in Sydney anyway. Notice the train of negative thinking, which actually was just excusing the fact that I was in the wrong. Negative, I don't like male drivers, which is genderist, and I don't do that anyway, but everything's wrong. Or I could have used the positive explanatory style, which is what I did do. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I just obviously wasn't looking enough. And he said the same thing. It's okay. Please don't worry. It's fine. I got in my car and I thought to myself, Karen, you really need to take more attention in what you're doing. Slow down. Just, do things a little slower, less haste, more speed. And I thought, you know what, at least nobody was hurt. Okay, I've got to pay the excess, but it doesn't matter. My learning for this is to slow down. And so that is what I'm now starting to talk to you about, a positive explanatory style. As much as you possibly can, err on the side of optimism, not pessimism, ladies and gentlemen, because the pessimism is going to hurt your health, the way of thinking. People don't want to be around you eventually because you just become a negative Nelly or a negative Neville, and people don't want that. You want to be happy Harold or happy Harriet, because life is better. We know from research that optimistic people generally are, listen to this, they're happier, they're more successful. You ready for this? They make more money. Get this, they live longer. So it's interesting that we are positive and we're able to see life as a real gift and not as an inconvenience. We tend to manifest that then. And it's really important to start thinking about your thinking. If you do tend to be negative, stop yourself in that thought and say, hold on a minute, I learned on that online series that I shouldn't be doing this. How can I replace that negative thinking with something more positive? And the studies around resilience are absolutely huge, largely around things like trauma, child abuse, domestic violence, etc. I'm often asked this question. There's studies that show that those who've suffered incomprehensible hardships can and have shown resilience in being able to recover. Yes, they have. But I believe that there are some experiences in our lives that are so soul wounding that we never get over them. The loss of a child. A couple of years ago, I was watching this history show on History Channel on Foxtel, and they were interviewing this old digger. He was about 95, and they were asking him, this interviewer was asking him, you know, what were, you know, some of the difficulties you had in the war, and, you know, what was it like? And he was talking about it. And then she asked him this question, what was the biggest heartache you had? What was the biggest loss you had? And I remember thinking, why would you ask him that? You know, what would you ask him that for? And this old digger, ladies and gentlemen, his little bottom lip started to quiver. And I just knew what was going to happen. And he started to quiver. And then there was a couple of tears coming down his face. And then he was sobbing inconsolably. And I thought to myself, please take the camera off this man, give him some dignity. And sort of she eventually realized that she needed to take, you know, end the interview. And the point I make with what I'm showing you in that example is that I think that there are some things that are so deep we can't recover from them. Yes, we learn to live with it. Yes, we learn to get on with our lives. But will we ever truly recover? No, we won't. But when we talk about resilience, it's about, you know, it's keeping on going in the face of adversity, but to still be able to help yourself by having a balanced approach, having a balanced life, getting yourself, you know, connected with society and kids and friends and all the things that the cubby pie I mentioned earlier. And the fact is that you are important, you matter. And we know that maybe through genetics and the natural conditioning and challenges in life, some of us are inherently more resilient in ways of thinking and of being than others. Why is that? We know, though, that resilience can be learned and built over time through a way in changing of our thinking, which I've just given you an example. And the more positive we are in our thinking, the more positive we are in what we do and the outcomes we receive. And if it's no other outcome that we receive but to be happier in ourselves and live more comfortably, then surely those are two great examples of why positive thinking and managing stress positively is important so that we can be more resilient and more loving of our lives. It's believed that resilience comes about through, as I've said, a certain way of thinking. And if we think in that positive mindset, we become positive in action and the way that we think. And I've given you the example of positive versus negative explanatory style. Make sure that if you tend to err on the side of negativism, every time you have a negative thought, stop and say, no, I'm not going to think that. And then reframe that negative thought into a more positive thought in your mind. Why? Because what, for example, addictions say is that it takes 90 days for some kind of thinking and behavior to change. So the more you stop your negative thinking, check yourself, and then start to think more positively, says people like the addictions around Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. The more you start replacing negative things with positive things, the more positive things start to take place in your life. The more positive you are about things, and so you get positive is generated by positive. Doesn't mean that life's going to be better or easier, but what we know is that thinkers take a breath and look forward for a way around the problem. They don't give up until they've overcome the issue, or they've learned to deal with the issue, or to put it somewhere that's not so overwhelming for them. So what we know about building resilience is obviously to adapt, and you probably in the department would be the masters of it and the mistresses of it. You know, you've had to adapt your entire way of delivering education. I don't have to tell you anything about it, Dad. You could tell all of us. Health is wealth. I've made that as a diamond today. Remember, if you don't look after your health, nobody else is going to do it for you. Come into every day with a positive that life will provide for you. Be hopeful, be positive, look for solutions to problems. Check your self-talking. I've said that on a couple of times already today. And if you don't know how to do it and you need more help, send me an email, let's talk about it. Live that balanced life, that Covey's pie. Don't forget that. Get the copy of his book. Expect and accept things are going to go wrong. Heavens, life is a journey. Don't we know that, right? And the more clearly defined goals we've got, and the more action plans we've got to create and to achieve those goals, the better off we're going to be. So have goals and work out ways to achieve those goals. Learn good time management skills, particularly in the roles that you've got. Do chunks of jobs together if you can. Don't leave your emails open all day, every day, and dive and dip and dive and dip and dive into those emails, because every time you go into an email that is not related to something that you're working on, you just distract yourself. And eventually you become so distracted, you walk home exhausted and realizing, actually, I did nothing today because I was too busy being distracted. Remember, grateful that you've got a great job, even though I know some of you might be worried that you won't have it next year. Believe that you will. Stop worrying about the fact that you won't, but be grateful for the fact that you've got it now. And remember that everybody around you, family, friends, department, colleagues, everybody's got their own issues. Some of them are more resilient than others. Some of them just give up and not fight on. And sometimes, particularly if you're on this line and you're in a leadership role, you need to make sure that you actually help the people working under and around you fight on. And how do you do that? By being an optimistic, positive leader. There's nothing better than an optimistic leader. And I know that probably in your histories and your careers, you've worked for some pretty average leaders maybe in the past, not at the department, let's say, negative people who don't greet you, who don't say hi. You don't want to be one of those. You're not going to be happy like that. So the 7 C's of resilience, I think what you could do with yourselves or even with your teams, score yourselves 1 out of 10 in each of these, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And then work out how you're going to increase any of those below 5. And if you're not going to score yourself below 5, then I'm going to believe that you really honestly think that you actually are higher than 5. Don't score yourself above 5, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not, because then you're just kidding yourself. Competence is the ability to know how to handle stressful situations effectively. Calm, breathe. If you're really feeling stressed, take a walk around the block. Go and grab some water. Walk away from a stressful situation, breathe, 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 and come back and try and resolve it later. Confidence in the belief in your abilities, which results. I mean, you are good at your job. Stop thinking you're not. If you weren't good at your jobs, you wouldn't be in them, right? So stop the negative self-talk about I'm not good at this and I feel inadequate. Where do you learn that? Inadequate thinking is learned. It's not something you're born with. Confidence, have a belief in your abilities, which results in confidence. Connection is critical. As I said earlier, that's the 3rd slice, the top right-hand slice of your pie. Connecting and with people and family and friends and children. Isolation is not good. It makes us go crazy. It makes us feel depressed, anxious, stressed. Some people who are isolated have high suicide ideation. Character is intrinsically about the life that you see. Are you positive or negative? Contribution, well, you all are making a major contribution to Australia, or New South Wales at least anyway, in terms of the work that you're doing. So you should score high on that. Your coping might be less high because you don't use your wide repertoire of coping skills. You're too busy trying to survive each day and not thrive in each day because you're not using some of the things I'm talking to you about today. Learn to cope more effectively with what's going on. The more control you feel you've got over your life and the decisions and the actions, the more resilient you feel. all the stuff I've been talking to you about today. So score yourselves 1 out of 10 for each of these. If you score lower than 5, my question is, what are you going to do about it? When? How? What's your strategy? How will you know if you've succeeded? It's really important to think about those, because if you can nail all of those 7, you'll generally be pretty resilient. Now, this particular slide is an interesting one. And this gentleman over here, this young gentleman over here, is a gentleman called Derek Redmond. Derek Redmond was tipped to win, I think it was the 200 meters in the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. Now, why I want to show you this YouTube, because it's very impactful around resilience. And when I show it to you, I want you to think about it in context of resilience. So if you take an athlete, an international athlete, these guys and gals, if let's say he's 25, have spent the last 25 years of their lives every single day, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going to track meets, going for exercise, training with their coaches, coming back home, getting showered, going to school, then after university, going to their squad camp, whatever it is. So they've spent the last 25 years equipped and trained and coached for this one event. And for him, it was the Barcelona 1992 Olympics. But also the other thing I want you to think about resilience is the families that are around these kids to get them to where they are going. So Kathy Freeman, as an example, had a whole community around helping her every day to get to where she got to, the best in the world. And so it's resilient communities that pull together and resilient families that help each other to create resilient international athletes. That's the point that I'm making. And I think sometimes when we look at these athletes, we don't truly take that step back and think about that. We just see, oh, he won or he did a great race, not such a good race. But we don't stop and think about, hold on a minute, there's much more in that than necessarily meets the eye. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the screens and I'm going to show you a YouTube of this race. And then I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about resilience in the context of the race. So just give me a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe go back to the 7 C's and just quickly think about that whilst I change the screen. Score yourselves. Just takes a wee minute and then I'll let you know when I've changed. Nearly there, won't be long. Okay. All right. All right, could somebody please tell me, can you see the screen has changed, if you wouldn't mind, somebody? Okay, thank you so much. I've been asked, is there a website that you'd recommend? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll actually send you what I've got. I'm happy to do that. Go and have a look at it. Yep, sure, no problem. Okay, I'm just now going into this particular YouTube. Here we go, guys. When I am down and though my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdens me, then I am still and wait here
silence till you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Well, I'm just going to change the screen again and wanting to know how you feel about that. Anybody, in terms of the concept of resilience that we're talking about? Anybody want to share with me what you feel about that? Anybody? Yeah, thoughts? Somebody was crying, bless you. Yeah, many people cry. I'm not sure, Nicole, why your video wasn't working, but that would be on your side, I guess, on your computer, because it's been working. Yeah, very inspiring, very emotional. And I guess, you know, if I had a little bit more time, I'm very, the fact I've got 5 minutes. I guess the important thing that I'm saying here around this is so moving, resilience from both father and son, real humanity, exactly. It brings us all to tears. Oh, it worked, perfect. I guess what I'm going to say here is that, you know, when let's go back a bit. This young man and that father of his had spent their whole lives getting him there, the point I made before I showed the YouTube, right? Now, so much was riding on this young man, you know, his whole career, everything, sponsorship, da. When his hamstring broke, he had the choice. He had 3 choices, actually. He could have sat down on his lane and cried, because he would. He could have sconed off the stadium and gone and joined his family and cried. Or he could have done what he did, which was to keep moving forward, because no matter what adversity, his hamstring, it was gone. You know, the Olympic winning wasn't going to be, it was gone. So he still wanted to finish what he had set out to do. So he, as you saw, hobbled across the line. And I can guarantee you that the 65,000 people who were looking at that, they won't remember the guy who actually won it. They'll remember him. Because you know what? That young man who actually knew he wasn't going to win the race, he got there in the end. And that's resilience. And I guess we all have it in us. We just need to start thinking that way, being able to work through the challenges that we've got and start being kinder to ourselves and start being, I guess, more resilient. Now, I threw this slide in. Obviously, as I've explained, and most of you know, leadership is my game. I've been doing it for a long time. He was a very, very interesting leader, and I've got this here in terms of resilience. He was grumpy, he was a big drinker, he was very depressed, he was a constant smoker. But in terms of resilience, I think he's probably one of the best examples that we've ever seen. And why I say that is because when he came into politics again, he was in politics most of his life, but to become the British Prime Minister, he actually sort of came into that time when the Germans were sort of invading Poland and the rest of Europe. And at the time, the King of England, the Duke at the time, was asked to go and have coffee with Hitler, and he did. And this guy, Churchill, who was now Prime Minister, was ropeable because he felt that, you know, that was like going and having tea with the devil. I actually believe that he probably, Churchill, is the most effective strategic leader of all time. He was not going to relinquish. He was never going to sort of lie down and be overrun by the German people or Hitler's army. And I actually believe that his "we will never surrender," which is an aspect of resilience, was what saved Hitler on some level at one particular time of winning that war. And I always say laughingly, if it wasn't for him, we'd probably be all German now. And that's not being cheeky. It's just being, he was a resilient man. His health wasn't great. He didn't look after it well either, but his thinking was resilient. So this is a second slide, like the one at the beginning about, you've seen the slide before, and I'm asking you again to think about what are you doing every day to turn things around for you, your family, your team, your organization, your country, and our world. It's an existential slide. Those are existential questions. I gave an example last time of I try and be the nicest person I can every day. I support the RSPCA and the Koala Fund, etc., etc. It's not everything, but it's little. But, you know, what are we doing every day to help our world and our country? Because if you're a leader, and most of you on the line are, I believe, it's important that we think about that as leaders in our families, our communities, our villages, our workplaces, and our country. So now's your turn, ladies and gentlemen. If you have anything that you would like to ask of me, I know that we're running out of time. If there's any question you have, you're very, very welcome to ask me. If you would like help, give me an email. If you've got life issues, leadership issues, anything that you'd like to discuss, if you'd like some coaching or think that you'd like some help with something, please feel free to just give me a call or to come back to me. Rod, you make a very good point, Rod. Rod says about the YouTube I showed you that actually seeing what happened to Derek Redmond, Rod says, reduces a very big commercial event to a deep personal journey for each competitor. And I think that's such a true statement. And also deep personal journey of the families of the competitors, Rod. I think that's a true point. Because as I said, I don't think we often think about that. But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, we're all here on this planet trying to do the best we can. And sometimes we have to experience really, really huge disappointments. And it's not always easy to recover from that. Yes, I will be sending you all the recording if you would like it. I will do that next week. And as I say, I'm always here if you want to chat. I also made this comment to the Wednesday group, so I'll ask you now. We all need to be validated and said that we're doing a good job from time to time. The three ladies, the three wonderful people at the department who made these online sessions possible, Jane Simmons, Anne Reddy, Samantha Jackson. Please, if you can, just send anyone or all of them a thank you for putting this on for you, because I think, you know, they've organized it, they've allowed me to come in to your lives and into your workplaces, and I'm really, really happy to be here. So it would be really lovely if you could thank them. Thank you, Maria. No problem, Mandy. And thank you all of you who are always so kind about, you know, giving me positive feedback for these sessions, and I just love doing it. So blessings to you. You know where I am if you need me. Have a fantastic Friday and take it easy out there. Speak to you soon. Bye.